Okay, what's the background music for philosophy? Do we just keep on with Tulip? Does this help us keep calm? I don't think so. I think we could find something better than that. Let's see. Obviously, I'm not going to play Sonic music. That would just be completely out of sorts there. You may, Nikki. Clearly, I'm pretty sure the answer is just I just play 24FX, and that's clearly learning music, right? This feels like I'm learning something. I can accept this. I'm just listening to the song now. 1 second. Okay. So, in various ways, this might be too much to actually talk over. Interesting. This might be like too high energy. I need something that's different. Wait, no. I think I got it. I think I got it. Yeah. Yeah, obviously, yeah. Do you ever just like stop thinking and this is what's going through your head? Because I do. Absolutely. There we go. Okay, so investigation of the sense organs, investigation of the senses. There's a variety of different ways this is translated. An analysis of the ayatanas, which is just straight up like an analysis of the senses again. A crucial difference between the way that we normally consider there being 5 senses, right? You have sight and sound, you have smell and taste and touch. Well, in this period, I'm not going to say in Buddhism because that's a ridiculously large category, but at this time in India, which is like 200-ish AD, CE if you prefer, there were considered 6 senses. There are 6 things that you can be aware of. You can be aware of, well, let's see it in their own words. Seeing and hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and the mind. So there were considered 6 of them. Like specifically mental images, when you visualize, they were considered a part of senses, just as, you know, suspect or reliable as stuff that you see or hear. There was not quite that distinction. And I kind of get that, because your ability to visualize and stuff does not actually get transmitted through, like, a mental image does not arrive through your eye. When you hear something in a dream, it doesn't come through your ears. If you had earplugs in, you could still hear in a dream. You still see while dreaming, even though your eyes are closed. It's coming from the processing stuff in your brain, displaying those images to you in a lack of stimulus, kind of. So I get what they're saying. A slightly nicer way to say that would be, let's see. Actually, wait, no. There's a better song for this. I need to. This will slowly drive me insane in a way that the philosophy alone will not. So I'm not allowed to have that. How about this? We haven't used this album yet, We've used this game before, but... that should be good. Okay. So to rephrase that first verse again, let's see if the Ocean of Reasoning, which so far has been one of my favorites. I think my most favorite one, honestly, is Nagarjuna's Middle Way, like specifically written that way. That's been the, if you just had to get one book on this topic, you should probably pick that one up. Okay, so here's some actual information. The Ayatana classification is a classification system for existing things that the Buddha actually employed. So the specifically describing reality in terms of these 6 parts, these 6 ways to know it, is actually a direct description from the words of the Buddha. So that's probably why a lot of people work within this framework, because it's something that you kind of have to know if you've read those texts to begin with. Okay. Vision, hearing, taste, smell, touch, and the inner sense are the 6 faculties, the visible, and so are their fields. That's another way to say you can hear, you can smell, taste, touch, and, mind. Here's where we're going to get into the stuff which is very confusing. The stuff that has multiple different... Wait, actually, I did not change the stream information. What do I call this? I call this just chatting, right? That's what this is. I really wish there was like a teaching one, but let's switch into just chatting. There we go. Okay. So here's the part that's going to be a real pain. Here's the part that we're going to need to understand the rest of it. But when I look at it immediately, it's not apparent. So, seeing does not see itself. How can what does not see itself see anything else? And I kind of get talk shows. I think I like just chatting, but yeah. Okay, so he's trying to make an argument here, but I don't really understand the argument fully. I guess what he's kind of saying is that, like, because this whole argument, remember, is in the context of trying to not put any, like, okay, we understand that things exist, no, this one. We understand that things exist conventionally, but what we're arguing against is the idea that things have definite essences, that they exist independently, that they are uncaused, that they have some kind of, like, thingness inside of them, right? So this argument is not saying that you're not capable of seeing things. What this argument is trying to say, I believe, is that you are, like, okay, so in the first chapter was like, things can't exist independent of themselves because they are caused, because they happen, they appear, they go away, and anything where you try to say that their essence was always there and always in potentia, that's a ridiculous thing to say. The second argument was that, like, basically things move, things change, things go, and what you're describing, the sort of essence, is not a thing. So at what point in the time does the essence appear? Does it appear before or after? There is no during. During is, like, infinitely small. This one seems to be saying, even if you acknowledge, you say my first two arguments are true, you could still make the argument that it doesn't matter about the thing. The fact that I am perceiving it has some sort of inner meaning, some sort of essence, that maybe the true meaning exists in the actual perception, which is an argument. And so he's gonna, I guess, try to pick apart and say that you can't have essence merely in the perception of a thing, which seems like it's going to be a difficult one. So first he starts and he says, you can't see the act of seeing. Seeing is not something that can examine itself. So I guess, is it not trustworthy that So if seeing was some sort of independent thing, it had some sort of its own essence, I guess he's saying that it would be able to examine itself. You'd be able to turn it back on itself. Let's see what someone who knows what they're talking about would say about this. They would say, okay, an entity cannot operate on itself. A knife cannot cut itself. A finger cannot point at itself, and so on. Hence, vision does not see itself. The argument here is that because this is true, it does not see things other than itself either, i.e. vision does not see anything. This argument seems puzzling. Oh no. Why should it follow from the fact that vision does not see itself, and that it also doesn't see anything else? There are two possible ways of interpreting it. The first one represents how Candrakirti understood it. Okay. Candrakirti wrote a pretty important commentary on this. So I'm gonna hope that the first explanation is really good. But if I don't like it, then maybe I'll have to look at the second one. Explanation number one. It's in the form of a metaphor, because of course it is. The scent of jasmine first pervades the flower, and then pervades what comes in contact with the flower. The general principle to be inferred from this is that a property of something can come to pervade something only if that property first pervades that thing. For an object to be seen, it must be pervaded by the property of having been seen, by the general principle just mentioned. This can only be so if vision first pervades itself. But since this idea of vision, this vision essence, is not found in vision, then this essence cannot be found in other things. No distinct object can be seen by vision specifically. Okay, I get that specifically from an idea, like an essence argument. If you're saying that there's some sort of like quality of vision that is independently true, then it would hold that that thing would be present in the thing that sees with. Whereas if vision is merely just something that is caused by other qualities, if it's merely caused by the physical nature of the thing we're looking at, if it merely accepts light and gives you a thing without any sort of like inherent property of vision inside of it, then there's no need for essence, I guess. That's at least an argument I can understand, if it's a weird one. Let's see the second argument. If seeing is the intrinsic nature of vision, then the vision must manifest this intrinsic nature independently of other things. Okay, I already like this one better. This one's more like how I understand it. This means vision should be able to see even in the absence of a visible object. For otherwise, its manifesting vision would be dependent on the existence of a visible object. Okay, so if vision is a real thing that your eyes possess, cosmically independently non-caused real thing, then it should just be able to do that. It shouldn't need anything else. It shouldn't even require an object to look at. But as it stands in the real world, a manifesting vision is dependent on the object. It's dependent on conditions. It's depending on seeing something that is to be seen. And even if there's no object, vision cannot see itself, okay? It doesn't. It's impossible for it to do it. Therefore, it does not have any intrinsic nature of vision. It's just an eye. It doesn't have some sort of visionness inside of it. Okay. That's interesting. So it's possible to argue now that it doesn't matter if vision can actually see itself, because there are examples of entities that do not operate on themselves. Specifically, okay, so here's what they're gonna say. So I guess the idea is that the Abhidharmist is making a counter argument here that really isn't preserved in the text, because they go on to talking about fire without having a very clear understanding of why we suddenly switched topics here. And I think the idea is that someone has brought up an idea that specifically says that you don't know, I guess, that the eye can't see itself, because a fire, while it appears to only burn its fuel, obviously eventually goes away. Okay, so you can describe that as a fire burning itself. Like, basically, I don't believe you. You can't prove that an eye does not in some way visualize itself. Just because it's hard to see doesn't mean it's not there. Okay. And he's saying the example of fire is not fully able to establish seeing. Okay, so I think what he's just saying here is that the act of burning is not to be found in the burnt, the not yet burnt, or the presently burning. So what he's saying basically is, no, I've already talked about this. We already showed that, yes, the fire is not operating on itself, because we literally look at section 2, okay? The essence of fire does not exist in the past, the present, or the future, because the essence of fire is a stupid thing to consider. It's not a thing that it can exist. You're not going to get yourself out of this by saying that. In other words, it does not exist in the gone, the not gone, or the going. It does not exist in the past, the present, or the future. Okay. When not seeing the slightest thing, there is no act of seeing. How can it then be reasonable to say that seeing sees? How can it be right to say that vision is the thing that is seeing? Okay, vision is an action that depends on circumstances. It is entirely a caused thing that cannot exist outside the situation that is in. You can't say that vision sees anything. I guess in the same way that you can't say that someone died of death. You know what I mean? Like, you're describing a process, and then you're trying to say that the process is the thing that causes it. That doesn't make any sense. If vision were ultimately real, its intrinsic nature would be seeing. Therefore, it makes no sense to suppose that vision exists even when we can't see something. Okay. We're on number 3. We're still on number 3. Don't worry. We're on section 4 of number 3. Yeah. Right. So far this one's making a little more sense to me, Valak. It seems to be saying that the main argument is that even if the essence of something doesn't exist in the physical object or process, what if the essence exists in the perception of it? Almost like a Platonic argument where it's like the world of forms exists, and it exists is like a perpetual way. It exists in our perception of things. And Nagarjuna is having none of that bullshit, because he's saying, if seeing had a independent essence, then seeing would be able to exist even in the absence of an object to look at, okay? Seeing would be able to see itself even when there's nothing to look at, when there's no light, when there's nothing there. And that's ridiculous, because you don't see. And then the person is like, well, maybe you could have the essence of seeing even in the absence of vision, in the sense that, like, a fire eventually burns itself out from its tinder. It eventually goes away, but that doesn't get rid of the idea of fire. And then Nagarjuna is like, no, we already talked about fire. Like, it doesn't exist in the past, it doesn't exist in the present, it doesn't exist in the future, there's no essence defined. But specifically, the act of seeing is a really important part of vision. It's like if you're saying, oh, seeing exists even when you can't see anything, that's ridiculous, right? Like you're trying to like make up a thing that doesn't exist. If you're saying that, oh, I'm seeing, I'm just not seeing what I'm seeing. No. So let's see section 5. Independently of itself, seeing does not see. Non-seeing does not see. It should be understood that seeing explains the seer. I don't like that description. Let's try this one. Vision on its alone does not see. Oh, hello. Hi. We're gonna talk about what that means, because I wanna try to break that down. Vision on its own does not see, or does merely a lack of vision see anything? One should understand that the seer is explained in the same way as vision. I'm gonna need a little more on that. So let's roll over to Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way and see what they say. Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way is, of course, a modern commentary, because it has a somewhat understandable title. It's not like Lamp to the Path of the Understanding of Nagarjuna's Middle Way. Like, these commentary names all start to blend together. Okay, perception is not accomplished by any independent entity known as vision. But that doesn't mean that things are incapable of the sight they perceive. In order to know what the proper subject of vision is, it's important to understand that a careful analysis of the perceptual process, and not to simply posit a faculty with the nature of vision. So it's like perception is a process by which we see things. It's silly to just say it takes place because of vision, and then be like, oh, vision is what makes your eyes work. It's like, no, your eyes work because they're made to do a certain thing. And once you understand it in terms of the process that's occurring, there's no room for this idea of an independently existing essence of vision. Yeah, this does seem like it's coming dangerously close up to the idea of how can things be real if your eyes aren't real? Like how can mirrors be real if your eyes aren't real? Like I try not to get too far into like the navel gazing. Yeah, vision requires someone to be seeing. It also requires an object, which if you're trying to argue that vision is some sort of independent, essential thing, some sort of fundamental, always real thing, even in the absence of any like conditions, that doesn't really make much sense, right? That's it. That it seems like vision's more like a process than an essence. So let's see. Oh, without this is getting into a little bit. This translation is extremely literal on Wisdom Library, and so I appreciate it. But also, it is incredibly literal, and sometimes I have to flip a bunch of pages to try to figure out what it's going for. Without letting go of seeing, a seer does not exist. And letting go of seeing, there is no seer. If there's no seer, where can there be what is seen and seeing? No, let's try that. Without detachment from vision, there is no seer, nor is there a seer detached from it. If there's no seer, how can there be seeing or seeing? Okay, so he's saying, if you're not viewing something currently, you can't be said to be seeing it, right? You can't be the observer if you are not observing. If there is no seer, what am I using for a better translation? I am alternating between Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way, which is a pretty literal translation from 1995, and Ocean of Reasoning, a great commentary on Nagarjuna's Mūlamadhyamakakārikā from 2006. But if you were going to pick up a book about this, Valak, I would say probably you would pick up a book called Nagarjuna's Middle Way. I can't really like do too much from it because it is a copyrighted work that I'm not going to just read on Twitch. But I think it's pretty okay for me to just post what the cover looks like. So if anyone just wants to read, if anyone just like wants to just look at this book, I know it's going to get a little fucked up, but give me a second here. It's going to look a little strange, but so, specifically, this book over here, this one, this is Nagarjuna's by Mark Sideris. Sideris. That's the one that if you just had to pick up one book on this title and you were able to find it somewhere, especially if you just find it discounted somewhere, because like these books, I don't know how to tell you this, these books are not big sellers. These are these are pretty small time things, but this is a very good combination of translation, in which I like the wording, and commentary. But I am making sure pretty carefully to spread my work around and just kind of cite things, but work mainly from the free translation I'm able to see. So once again, in this terms of vision, the seer is defined as the one who is seeing. And as soon as you try to say that it exists without someone to see, yes, it's actually kind of interesting, because that argument is saying sounds don't exist if someone isn't there to hear it. But this is actually saying that the sound totally exists when someone isn't there to hear it. Just you can't say that that sound is an independent thing. It only exists in terms of some observer as a sound, because we are not perceiving it otherwise. It's kind of like Nagarjuna is big on saying that things conventionally exist but ultimately don't, and I think that's a very clever way to describe it, because there's like a Roman philosopher who was describing, basically he was going full on nihilism, and he was saying nothing exists, like nothing exists but me. I'm the only thing in the universe. and someone was like talking to him, and he like smashed his foot into like a lamppost, and it hurt a lot. And he said something like, "Therefore I have disproven you." In other words, like, because I am not currently able to perceive you, because I am in so much pain, you briefly do not exist. And of course, that's ridiculous. Like, you are not the sole god. You are not the only real thing in the universe. And Nagarjuna thinks that's just as stupid as saying everything in the world that you see is perfectly real and eternal and non-caused. And nihilism is not what he's trying to say. And a lot of people kind of like associate Buddhism with a little bit of like a nihilistic, nothing's real, nothing matters. No, things conventionally exist. Absolutely, you're looking at them right now. You can do things with them, you can study them, you can observe them. Like, even if you walk away and come back, you weren't looking at it, but the thing's probably still there in a similar manner. Things follow cause and effect. Therefore, things exist conventionally. But what they don't do is exist eternally. They don't exist in some sort of magical other world as essences. And when you treat things as if they do exist in this magical other world, you run into problems. Because you say things like you start treating the idea of things as if they are the thing. You start saying things like, you know, I want to be happy, therefore I'm gonna go out and get some happiness. Like, you're treating happiness as if it's like a physical thing that you can go pick up, as if it's some sort of like, oh, I know what that is, when it's not merely conditions that cause you to have a pretty decent time, right? There is a danger of thinking of things as if they are their own separate thing, and not, one second, caused. And if a thing is caused, that means it will be happening for a bit, and then as sad as it is, there will be a time when it isn't happening anymore. So at least my understanding of this, the way I kind of live my life, is that you don't hold yourself back from enjoying something while it's happening. Because, yeah, the thing, yeah, it's not real, it's not eternal, it's not some sort of like thing that is cosmically important. But it's still enjoyable at the time. You, in fact, enjoy it as much as you possibly can. Because the thing will absolutely end. It will go away. You might not be able to see what's causing the conditions. You might be able to not perfectly map out what causes you to, you know, be in a pretty good or a pretty bad point in your life. But it will absolutely go away at some point. Nothing lasts forever. And if things were independent and eternal, if that was actually true, then it wouldn't be a mistake to assume that they are, but at least in life, it doesn't seem to be. Enjoy things while they're there. They will be gone eventually. But also, not necessarily gone forever. Really? Because that's the thing, is even emptiness is empty of itself. Like people will then do the other thing. They'll say like everything is empty, and then emptiness also almost becomes like this cosmic other world. It almost becomes like this idea of it. No, emptiness is empty even of itself. Emptiness is not a place. So it's silly to say that things are gone forever, right? But it's also silly to say that things will last forever. It's just the way it is. Things change. It's almost like nothing in life is eternal and uncaused. It's almost like everything is dependent on dependent conditions. Funny story. That's almost like his entire argument here. Let's try section 7. Just as a child is said to emerge independence on the father and mother, likewise it's said that consciousness emerges independence upon the eye and visual form. So literally my argument, everything is caused by something. Consciousness, even though consciousness seems like it's this amazing thing that exists inside your head, that it's like, you know, some people identify consciousness with like a soul or something, because, you know, people say, you know, your consciousness is you, and that's true to a sense, but in the Buddhist doctrine, there is no you, because the you that you are, the thing that I am talking to right now, is just as made of aggregates. It's just as caused by things. And you can kind of figure that out in your life. If you look back, this is kind of an uncomfortable thing to do, but I don't know if anyone's ever done it. You say to yourself, oh, I've always been this way, I've always liked this thing. And that's a very good conversational tool when you're talking to people. Like, people say like, oh man, how long have you been into like, PC 98 games? And I'm like, oh, I've always been into it. But if you go back in time and you ask me when I'm 5 years old, my opinion on PC 98 games, I will not know what you're talking about. Like, all the things that make up me, that I think of as very personal, internal things, they were all caused by some sort of external circumstance, right? At some point in my life, I thought this was interesting. At some point in my life, I discovered that this was a fun topic because of something. It was all caused. You could go back in time probably and change a lot of that, and you would end up with a quite different person, because the you that is here right now is constructed. It's made of parts, and that means it's not a single independent thing in the method of some people visualize the soul. But that's fine, because it still conventionally exists. Once again, this isn't nihilism. This isn't, nothing in life matters. This is, hey, nothing in life matters. I'm free to be whatever. My identity is constructed, so I'll just construct it out of things that are fun while I'm here, right? I'll only do things that are interesting. I won't keep on doing things that aren't fun because my identity is wrapped up in the non-fun having thing, right? Oh, I guess this is me. I guess I just enjoy this. That's bullshit. But, obviously there's of course habit and stuff like that. We do easily fall into habits, but a lot of you, I suppose, is as a psychology course once said to me, illusion of consistency. Another way to say that is habit. You kind of keep doing the things you do because you do those things, and it's easy. It doesn't require thinking to keep doing them. But that doesn't mean that you have an essential nature inside you that enjoys it. Which is good, actually, because it makes you free to enjoy other things. It doesn't mean that when the things that you're currently enjoying, if you cease to enjoy them for a little bit, it doesn't mean that you're suddenly nothing. Which is good. Because if you identify yourself entirely with certain external things, and those external things stop being fun, that doesn't mean that you cease to exist. You're just as real, or just as fake, just as empty as you were before. I think it's cool. How about argument 8? Because I guess this would be saying, because independently there is no what is seen and no seeing. The four such as consciousness do not exist. How can clinging exist? Okay, so this is going to get into a pretty important, this word clinging here, sometimes translated as attachment. This is a really, really big goal in Buddhism. It's a really important thing. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, which is I interpret it as being able to enjoy a thing without being wrapped up in the idea that that thing has to be forever, and then suddenly falling apart when the thing is not around anymore. Some Buddhists translate that very differently. They say that enjoying the thing at all, in fact, is clinging, is attachment, and that what you need to do is separate yourself from the world entirely. Like, say, in a monastery somewhere. That you can purely observe the world without any sort of clinging, and you definitely wouldn't need to enjoy things at all. Except maybe slightly enjoying, I guess, the sensation of being in that state. Because a lot of those states are described as being quite fun. But I don't like that. I like the sort of more tantric interpretation of it, which is that sensory things can be good, actually, because they are a powerful tool, especially in terms of visualization. They are a powerful metaphor, they are a powerful description of things. So as such, a fully enlightened person would totally be capable of going to a party and having a good time. He would also just be fun when the party is over. If none of those people ever talk to him anymore, it would be a little sad, but it wouldn't be terribly bad, right? Because you still had a fun time. The thing still exists. You're still doing good. Like, that doesn't mean that your life's over. It doesn't mean that, like, oh no, it's all gone. It all fell apart. Retroactively, everything I did is now ruined. That's ridiculous. Why is it more valid? It isn't. It's just the one I like more, to be honest. The answer, I guess, is because it works better for me. And what I mean that is that there are certain, not even getting into different flavors of Buddhism, because man, do they disagree with each other. Let's literally just talk Mahayana. We're going to talk Mahayana, specifically the later Mahayana, kind of Vajrayana-ish stuff. So that would be the Chinese schools that have some Tantra, certain really specific types of Zen Buddhism that actually do some tantric practices, and a few parts of Southeast Asia, but mostly Tibet. So that let's be very specific at what I'm talking about. Okay, so in that thing, you think, oh, it's Vajrayana, that means that everyone does tantric practice. That's ridiculous. No. A lot of people do a sutra-based practice, which is basically they read the scriptures and they meditate. Meditation is mostly focused on developing insight, but there's also a focus on developing knowledge. Specifically, you develop like the ability to concentrate on something until your concentration is unbreakable, like a diamond. It is diamond clear mind, I guess you could describe it. A mind of clear light is probably my favorite description of that, because it says very little, but it sounds very cool. But anyway, you develop a mind of clear light, and then you use that state you're in, where concentration is no longer tiring, I guess is the best way to describe what the state feels like. If you are focusing very intently such that your mind is not coming up with any thoughts, your brain is 100% occupied, and yet it doesn't feel tiring. It feels like you could just do it forever. It feels just as good as just sitting there. Perfectly normal. And then in that state, you basically examine various things. You examine the aggregates. You basically break yourself down and eventually sort of construct yourself back up, but it's a long process. It is a slowly working towards a goal. And some people describe this as a goal that cannot be completed in one lifetime, which is a very disappointing way to think about it. And I don't like to think about it like that, because that just makes a lot of people think that it's pointless, especially if you're not too high up on the idea of reincarnation. A goal that can't be completed in your lifetime is a goal that can't be completed. So I don't like to think of it like that. But the idea is that you're gradually chipping away at something, or building something up, or gradually forming this thing. And then at the end of this road, you have enlightenment. And you step out, and generally the kind of enlightenment I see in that sort of sutra-based thing is big on sort of like existing a little bit separate from everything, because you know everything's fake, right? That makes it a little difficult for someone who isn't a monk. And also from some people I've seen, it makes it really easy for people to identify depression and depersonalization and think like, oh shit, I'm so enlightened right now. It doesn't even feel like my life is real. It doesn't even feel like I'm worth anything. I must be the Buddha. And it's like, that's a really dangerous way to get into it. Like, obviously, you don't have that happen when you're learning under a real teacher, when you're at a monastery with people who know what they're doing. You get that kind of shit when people just read a book and they just like go for it. Like the kind of person who's like, I refuse therapy, but I will absolutely read this 1,000-page book on the history of Buddhist practice. And you fall into that. There's actually been some pretty sad cases of people like, you know, ending really badly. I don't want to talk about it, but they're not around anymore for obvious reasons. They identify this depersonalization, derealization, the idea that it constantly feels like they're living in a simulation and they're unable to actually make any sort of lasting emotional connection with everything around them. They identify that as being like holy in some way. And that's fucked up. That's probably not what you should be doing. The idea of meditation that I see it is that it quiets your discursive thoughts. But that doesn't mean that it prevents you from having thoughts, right? It stops the animal brain in your head that's constantly chattering on and on. It stops the train of thoughts where the track is literally a circle, and this is not a useful method of thinking. This is just dredging up old bullshit kind of thing. But it stops that, and then leaves you free to actually do something. If the end of your spiritual practice is that you choose to do nothing, or even worse, you are able to do nothing. If you choose to do nothing because you're having a great time doing nothing, at least that's something. But if your spiritual practice leaves you completely non-functional at the end of it, I don't agree with it. And that's not to say that's the way that sutra-based practice works. No, it's literally the most common way to engage in Buddhism at all. But I want to draw a distinction between what does a tantric practice look like. Tantra is called the resultant vehicle, and I really like that term. So the most concise description of what a tantra practice looks like is this. Instead of gradually building to the end point, just grab the end point from the start. So what you're doing is, instead of slowly building away or chipping up or however you visualize until you are the kind of person who can be enlightened, instead of slowly doing good deeds and reading sutra and purifying yourself, you simply go, well, I want to get here, so I'm just going to go straight here. And it's a type of meditation that basically visualizes you already as fully enlightened. It manifests the qualities of fully enlightened rather quickly. And obviously you don't stay that way, right? You don't just go, today I will be the Buddha. And then it's like, I have seen all of my past lives. Truly, it took me about 12 hours, and I have sped-run Buddhism. Let me just submit my time here to speedrun demos. That's not the way it works. But tantric practice is very big on creating a state where you are able to kind of see what that fully enlightened state is like. It makes heavy use of visualization, but it's actually interesting. It's not just visualization in the terms of like what you probably think of, which is sight. It's very big on like visualizing feelings. So like a lot of people say, I can't do this because I can't hold in my head the entire mandala. I can't visualize it in front of me. And I would say to that, why are you visualizing it in front of you? You're supposed to be part of it. You're supposed to be in the center of it, feeling it. The words literally are, arise in the form of Haruka. That doesn't mean I am looking at a picture of Haruka. He's blue, he has multiple arms, and if he's in his wrathful form, he has big fangs. No, it means feel that you are Haruka. That's the nature of it. That's the nature of the meditation. So what you do from that is you basically become, at least for a brief period of time, a kind of entity that cannot exist. That's another thing that's very interesting. Haruka is what's known as a yidam, which is sometimes translated as a god, but Haruka does not have any independent existence, right? Whenever you visualize Haruka, you're supposed to visualize Haruka as if it is transparent, as if it's made of light and has no actual substance, as if it is definitely empty. It's very impressive and scary. And if you saw a picture of Haruka, you'd be like, oh, that's a big monster. That's what the hell is that? But it's fake. It's fake just like everything else. So what you're doing is you're identifying yourself with this thing that cannot exist, this perfect entity, and you're arising as a enlightened thing. And in the process of doing this, you see a bunch of weird shit, and you also feel a bunch of weird shit. Specifically, one of the first things you do in the 6 yogas of Naropa, which is probably the only tantric practice I know anything about, and even then I'm not very good at it, is Tumo, is a form of meditation whereby you visualize a certain part kind of above your belly button, but like 6 inches back. So like almost touching your spine, kind of. Like directly in front of your spine, a little bit above your belly button. You visualize that place, and by doing that, your body kind of contracts those muscles when you're breathing, and it causes real life heat to actually build up in that spot in your body. People have actually done tests on it and discovered that yes, people can actually increase their body temperature a little bit, and specifically can actually be very resistant to lowering of body temperature. So it's not so much that they're like giving themselves a fever, it's more like they can survive colder temperatures as long as they sit in this very particular way and breathe in a very particular way. They can actually sort of stave off the effects of frostbite and stuff. For more ridiculous examples of that, of people specifically practicing that method and not any of the other parts, you get like Wim Hof, you get like the Iceman, the man who's just like dunks himself directly into freezing like water with ice floating in it, and then gets out, and then like you measure his skin temperature, and his skin temperature is only like a couple degrees below what you'd expect for a normal human just walking around. The kind of guy who just like takes his shirt off in the Arctic and he's like fine for vastly longer than a person should be. Like what he's doing is he's using it's not like magic, right? It still obeys the laws of physics. When you contract your muscles, and especially when you breathe, because breathing is contracting a lot of muscles at once, you can breathe in a certain way where you're basically using the waste heat created by the fact that, muscles aren't 100% efficient. You're using the waste heat to warm yourself up. And that's basically what Tumo is in a meditation sense. But because you're generating heat, that heat is really, really easy to focus on. Your brain doesn't wander when it's literally the pit of your stomach feels too hot. It feels really unnatural, and like you focus on it, just it's like the difference between trying to stare at a specific point on a blank piece of paper and putting a dot on a piece of paper. Your eyes are naturally drawn to the dot on the piece of paper, whether you are really trying to or not. That's basically my understanding of it, and it seems to work. But yeah, so when I see things written from a tantric point of view, generally people focus on the sensations in life not really being evil, but being either medicine or poison depending on how they are applied. Becoming attached to them is a bad thing, but using them in a way that gives you more realization, using them in a way that lets you lead a happier life that is also unattached, is a possibility. And then a lot of sort of monasteries that I've seen, a lot of people that talk, don't seem to see that as much of a goal. But so that's actually in a bizarre way. That's why I've seen tantric practice described as a lot more accessible to the average person, which is a weird way to describe it. This is something that was taught by weird people who live in caves. And some of the rites included weird shit like meditating in butchers' yards, like meditating in charnel houses, and like burning corpses to ashes and like spreading the ash on yourself. There's all sorts of incredibly eye-catching, like tantric rituals. And a lot of those rituals are sort of like antinomianism, which is basically you are doing something that is so against your own customs, that is so outside the realms of what you think as normal, that it basically forces your brain into like working a little differently. You're kind of almost like violating taboos, and then your brain is like, oh shit, like what else was sort of like not real? It's a cool thought. I will say though that a lot of those tantric rituals are neat as a teaching exercise. They're neat to read about. I don't find them particularly useful for the average person. Like, because a lot of people, funny enough, they get really into the spectacle of Tantra, and they get attached to that. They want to dress really cool, and they want to light fires and candles, and they want to like, like they want the blood, the bowl for the blood, and they want the butcher's knife, and they want all the accoutrements, and they want to wear a lion's pelt, because a lot of tantric practitioners associated with being girded with like a lion pelt as like a belt. And they get all into that bullshit and they miss the point, right? So I feel like that for me, I don't necessarily need additional spectacle, but the spectacle is perfectly cool as like an art piece. But do not identify the spectacle as the substance, and do not get really, really into causing spectacles at the cost of everything else. If I had to say, that's my understanding of it. Okay, we actually have the last section here, so let's do that before I get completely sidetracked. It should be understood that seeing explains hearing and smelling and tasting and touching, mind, hearer, and what is heard. So what he's saying is, I take this as saying, just because I spent this entire chapter talking about seeing, don't you dare tell me that hearing is somehow different. Don't you dare tell me that you can hear without anything to be heard, that you can hear without your ears, that you can taste without food, that you can think without your brain. Don't you tell me that these things exist as independent essences. I've already described hearing. Hello, Mari. I've already described seeing it holds for all the 5 senses. Don't waste my time with any of the other, all the 6 senses, I suppose, in Buddhism. Don't waste my time with any of the other 5. And that, so far, I feel like this is a pretty good argument. As it's a pretty good argument that's very, very unclear, but the commentaries were very specific about what this means, which makes me think that a lot of people read this and then their first response is just, what? What? I mean, Nagarjuna's stuff is very condensed. This was literally like 9 stanzas and I spent like an hour talking about it. So I don't know if this is going to be a good idea, but let's at least try to start chapter 4 a little bit, you know, just a bit. And I'll probably get, my brain will die in the middle of it. But let's just see how it goes. Are you here for philosophy, Mari? Ooh, investigation of the aggregates. This might be a good one. I'm definitely gonna, if I don't finish this one, I'm gonna start next week with this one. Okay. Yeah, we're talking about philosophy, and in not that long, I'm gonna be playing more Toho, because my brain is reaching capacity. Also, my ability to talk near constantly like this is reaching a little bit of capacity. Let's start with... Oh, nice. Thanks for coming. Let's start with what is it? Investigation of the aggregates, also described as examination of the aggregates, and there's a lot of ways to say it probably. Let's just make sure all my different commentaries are all on the same bit, so I don't get distracted. Examination of the aggregates, and then my favorite one, of course, describes it as an analysis of the skandhas. Okay, so a skandha is basically a way to classify things. Okay. It is... The 5 basic things are the physical, the feeling, the perception, volition, and consciousness. The third, I need a very good description of what a skandha is, because an aggregate is generally the way it's translated into English, but that is not. Okay, so skandha just means group in this sense. It literally just means the 5 groupings that Buddha described reality as going into. So it is possible from looking at the way it was described to make the mistake, I suppose, of thinking that these groupings are real. Because when the Buddha says there are 5 ways to organize reality, they are this, this, and this. They are called the skandhas. It does make sense to be like, well, Buddha said they were real, so they're real. When it's like, he kind of just said they're there. He didn't necessarily say that they're real. So I'm hoping this one's going to be a very good argument. Okay, apart from the cause of form, form is not perceived. Apart from form, the cause of form does not appear. Okay. Rupa is not found separate from the cause of rupa, nor is the cause of rupa seen without rupa. Okay, so things are not seen when they are not apparent. Things are not seen when they are not physically in front of you. Things cannot be found separately from the things that cause them. Rupa being, in this case, like physical reality. It's like the qualities of something, like color and shape, for instance. So you don't find a thing that doesn't also have its physical qualities. The tangible, the audible, the taste, and the smell. So this is kind of like similar to the sensory argument, but arguing a little bit not from that the thing exists within the sense, but that the thing exists as a grouping, that the thing exists as a skandha, I suppose. Is that a way that something could exist? If there were form apart from the cause of form, it would follow that form is without cause. There is no object at all that is without cause. Okay. If a rupa were separate from the cause of rupa, it would follow that rupa is uncaused, but no object is without cause. So if there could exist an object without any of its qualities, it would follow that then there could be uncaused objects. which is kind of scary, because if things can be completely uncaused, that means that they could just happen randomly. They happen without any sort of lead up to it. That seems like a chaotic world that we do not observe. What would be a cause? This would cause two absurd consequences. Okay. I think I'm actually getting their argument, because I literally just made this argument without reading it. It would be possible for anything to come into existence any time. That's the argument I made. It would be ridiculous. And the other one is all effort at producing something would be futile. If things can come into effect without causes, there would be no reason to ever try to cause anything, which is not the case, obviously. If a cause of form existed apart from form, it would exist as a cause without fruit. Causes without fruit do not exist. So if you're saying that the act of causing something has its own independent essence, then that essence of doing something could exist without the actual effect of it doing anything. So you'd have to say kind of crazy things like the act of digging could exist without ever having anything be dug up, right? Like that the act of like living could ever exist without anyone ever being alive. If living itself was some sort of independent existence, not merely an effect of a physical system. That's ridiculous. Okay. If form existed, a cause of form would be untenable. If form did not exist, a cause of form would be untenable. So if the form of an object existed independently from everything else, then there would be no reason to ever cause it. If the form existed, a cause of form. If a form did not exist, a cause of form would be untenable. So he's saying, like, if the form existed independently, the causes would be ridiculous. You'd have no need for them. But if no form ever existed, there was literally nothing there, then there can be no cause. If there is no result at all, there can't be anything doing anything, because we have no result. Okay. Forms which do not have a cause are not tenable. Therefore, do not conceive of the concept of form at all. I'm going to need a little description on what the hell that one means, though. It would be natural to think that Nagarjuna wants us to conclude that Rupa is without cause, but that would be incorrect. He denies that Rupa is uncaused, but he also denies that it is caused. Interesting. All undertakings would be pointless if nothing had any causes. One can deny that Rupa has a cause without affirming that Rupa is causeless. If there are good reasons to deny both Rupa has causes, probably we should affirm neither. We should look on some sort of hidden assumption that leads to a paradoxical situation. Okay, so he's trying to say that it doesn't make sense that the cause is real, but it doesn't also make sense that the thing is uncaused. It seems like there's some sort of middle state that because we've kind of like gone both ways, and we've shown that it's ridiculous for either way. So it's got to be something else. Hi, Mari, are you dying? It is untenable to say the fruit is like the cause. It is untenable to say that the fruit is unlike the cause. So this is a similar sort of argument from this one we've actually done before, okay? This is the same as saying it is ridiculous to say that the fire already exists in the tinder, just as it's ridiculous to say that like the tinder essence persists in the fire. My brain also hurts, but this one's going pretty fast. I'm gonna finish this one before I do Toho. So I understand this one because we've actually already gone through it. Feeling and perception, impulses and mind, and all things are comparable in every aspect at every stage and with form. What is this? This is generalizing an argument of the skandhas. By proving the argument of one dharma, the argument of all dharmas is proven. Okay, so what he's saying is that because all sorts of things in this way, all sorts of things that are aggregated, are similar in this way, by making this argument, I'm actually arguing against the emptiness of all dharmas. That just because I argued specifically against the emptiness of a certain thing, all of these things have these qualities. You're gonna have to refute my argument, not merely just bring up a different thing that I need to argue. When having argued by means of emptiness, everything of that one who objects is not an objection. It is similar to what is established. So you can't just go, what about water? What about trees? What about air? No, those are not new arguments. Those are the same argument I just delivered. Okay. When having explained by means of emptiness, everything of one who finds fault is not a fault. It is similar to what is established. That's basically the same thing over again. It's saying that no, I have made my argument here. The skandhas do not have independent existence. They are assemblages of other things. There's no room for some sort of independent soul in there. There's no room for any essence. I liked this one. I actually liked these two chapters a hell of a lot more than I liked the second chapter. Personally, I find within these, not quite in this exact way it's stated. It's stated in an archaic way. But I find within these an argument that I can apply to my own modern life, I guess. It's understandable enough when you, and I'm very sorry, Mari, that's certainly a thing. When I find a argument in here that makes sense to me. But, oh man, I'm gonna have to stop for a second. Oh. Ugh. Anyone have any feelings on this one? My feeling is currently just pain. Yeah. Ugh. So I'm gonna go to be right back. I'm gonna drink some water, and we're going to do a completely different kind of pain. It's actually very interesting. Yes, thank you. Ooh. Oh, I put the stretch sign on the wrong bone. Now the stretch moves around. That's ridiculous. The stretch is supposed to be hooked to the background, not actually hooked to my head. I'll fix that later. Okay, but first of all. Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I stretched too much. I understand. Don't pull something, Bugs, or that'll happen. There we go. Now more than ever, especially given that I'm like sitting here for large blocks of time streaming, I am quite happy that I have a, yeah, it was, thank you very much. Like seriously, that good joke. You got that punchline perfect. I'm very glad I have a somewhat decent chair. Like having a nice desk chair is quite good. It's a shame it's so expensive though, but whatever, I had a job at the time. And hopefully it'll last for many years. I'll just have to deal with it. But we're gonna go to BRB. I'm gonna set up Toho. And Toho is gonna be interesting because it's gonna require a lot of brain, but it's gonna require a lot of brain power in a completely different way. Specifically, I'm gonna be thinking so much about reacting. I'm gonna be trying to do everything that I will be able to have no conscious thoughts whatsoever. A different part of my brain will be used to such profound degree that I will become completely brainless. So of course, naturally, I should do that live on stream because, you know, content. Also, am I the only one who found that my stream title, like when I was playing Animal Crossing, was like the funniest joke I've ever made? Maybe I just have a bad sense of humor, where I'm just like, let's read this 1800-year-old Buddhist text, but first, some Animal Crossing. It's like, it just makes me seem psychotic. Like no normal human being would be like, yeah, Mūlamadhyamakakārikā, Animal Crossing. They could go on the same day. That's fine. Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to BRB, and then I'll sit up. Actually, I'll like stand up for a second.